this morning. I can see there's a crowd, almost a football team, you know, 7 aside. And I think it'd be important that we go around the table just to introduce us so people know who's who and what's what. I'm Councillor Terry Ennigan, I represent Penderry Ward, and I'm chair of the Antisocial Behaviour Inquiry Panel.
Michelle Roberts, I'm Scrutiny Officer.
Yes, I'm here, Councillor Ward.
I'm Cheryl Philpott, one of the 5 councillors from Swansea Ward. And can I just say, don't forget to push the button.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Philpott, one of the 5 councillors for Scrutiny Ward. I just say, of all the scrutiny items that we're looking at for this project, this is going to be one of the ones I'm most interested in, because I think for the people who are involved, it must be the most, in times, very frustrating, but it's got to be the most complex part of the whole of the scrutiny. So I applaud you before we start. Thank you.
Gentlemen, you ain't come down yet.
Tom Minchell, Prevention Coordinator with the Youth Justice Service.
Philippa Elliott, the Practice Manager for Swansea Youth Justice Service.
Amanda Wilson, a Practice Lead in the Youth Justice Service.
Good morning, I'm Helen Williams, Principal Officer for Adolescent and Young People Services in Child and Family.
And I'm Paul Worsfold, Evolved Youth Service Manager.
Kelly Richards, Principal Officer for Early Help, the Single Point of Contact, the CMET team and Evolve Young People Services.
I'm Kelly Shannon, I'm Principal Social Worker within the CMET team, and CMET stands for Contextual Missing, Exploited and Trafficked.
Thank you for that.
I think online we have Councillor Louise Gibbard, we have Councillor Hayley William, we have Gareth Pritchard, Councillor Alison Pugh and Sam Bennett.
Could we have apologies, please?
Yes, apologies today were from Mike Day. Apologies today from Mike Day, Mike Tribe, Mark Tribe, Mary Jones, Matthew Jones, Rebecca Fogarty and Victoria Holland.
Any disclosures of personal prejudice and interests? No. Any whip votes and declaration of party whips? No. Yes. And next we go into public questions. Any public questions come in?
No public questions that relate to this agenda.
Item 5, Youth Justice Team and Evolve. I see we've got a couple of cabinet members here. Louise Gwilliam or online, Hayley Gwilliam, Bewley Davis, relevant officers. So, you know, we've got quite a few people involved, and it's nice to see a lot of you here today. And it keeps it warm, I think. Yeah. So I'm going to hand straight over to Councillor Gwilliam to start the report off.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, can I just apologise for not being in the room today? We've got back-to-back online meetings, so I just wouldn't have made it. The report today is very cross-cutting, cabinet members, and it looks at early intervention and prevention and all the good work that's being done by Child and Family Services. It's a very comprehensive report, but I'd like to highlight as well that staff and officers have been working incredibly hard during exceptionally challenging times, post-COVID and the cost of living crisis, which has seen a presentation in behaviours which can be quite challenging. I just like to, congratulate the team for all the work that they're doing, and then hand over. I don't know if Louise Gibbard has any more to say.
No, likewise. Again, also say I've been in the same meetings as Hayley, so I'm sorry that we can't be here in person. But yes, our sort of this report's kind of split between Hayley and I as our portfolios, and as you can see, there's an incredible amount of work which is going on in this, and as Hayley said, in some difficult circumstances. So I don't want to repeat anything Hayley said, and I'm looking forward to the officers taking us through that. And thank you all for your support.
Did you want to come in just now? No.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm hoping that everybody has had the opportunity to read through the report that has been prepared. I'm going to start us off really by just going through some of the highlights from that report. I'm just going to draw out some key points. And as has already been observed, there are quite a number of us here from Child and Family Services. So collectively, we would like to sort of offer any answers to any questions that you may have following that. So I'd just like to start really by saying that the approach that we take to antisocial behaviour in child and family is very much a partnership approach. It's very important for us to do that for lots of reasons. One, because there are separate teams within child and family itself, where there is crossover around working with young people who may be involved in antisocial behaviour, but also it's linking in with our partners external to our own service area, and without that partnership approach we would not be able to reach the numbers of young people in the communities that we work with. So for the purposes of this report, I just want to provide just a bit of an overarching introduction to the teams that are represented today, and those teams are Evolve, so our youth service, who provide quite a lot of detached outreach work within communities. Youth clubs are part of the remit of Evolve, and there's quite a bit of schools based work that goes on from that team as well. We've also got the Youth Justice Service. So the Youth Justice Service work with young people who are either on the kind of cusp of offending behaviour or involved in antisocial behaviour, and the work there is undertaken at a preventative level, but the team itself also work with young people who have gone through or are involved in the criminal justice system at a statutory level, so supervision of court orders, etc. So in terms of the connection between youth justice and antisocial behaviour, I think it's important to note that we work very, very closely with our partners. And Gareth Pritchard, I think, is on the call as our antisocial behaviour coordinator. So there's very distinct partnership working between those two services. Particularly with youth justice, they pick up the work with young people who reach tier 2 of the antisocial behaviour process. And when they get to that stage, the visits that are undertaken are done in partnership between Youth Justice Service and Gareth Pritchard and his team. And if there are any questions on that, we obviously are able to answer them because we have the key people in the room that can provide a little bit more information on that. I guess what I want to say is that that element of work for youth justice is preventative, and across the board we work with antisocial behaviour hopefully at the earliest possible opportunity. So our aim is to be preventative and to provide early intervention. In addition, the Youth Justice Service, along with Evolve, will link in with work in schools and youth clubs in order to sort of reach young people wider within the community and as small groups, really. And then we've also got CMET, which, as Kelly quite rightly has pointed out, I'm very grateful that you went through the meaning of that. So our contextual missing, exploited and trafficked team. That team responds to extrafamilial harm, so harm that is outside of the family environment or the home environment. And there's a focus really around exploitation, youth violence, kind of peer-on-peer abuse, and we sort of work in a contextual way, working in places and locations from that team. And quite often what we are finding is that when referrals are made into CMET, there is often a crossover between concerns around exploitation and some young people who might be involved in antisocial behaviour. So it's just to set the scene really within Child and Family that these are the key 3 teams that would be working in this particular area. So obviously I don't want to go through the whole report in detail, but in terms of pulling out the key points, I know that part of what we needed to respond to is how we identify antisocial behaviour as a whole service. So I just want to touch on some of those points to begin with, really. So as I've already mentioned, partnership working is a real priority for us, and that will involve us as a group of services, our police colleagues, health colleagues, housing, and our colleagues within education. And we always try to take a targeted response when we become aware of any concerns within communities around antisocial behaviour. And quite often, that targeted response is what leads us to consider the work that we need to do. So a lot of the work that we've undertaken within schools, for example, has come from discussions and concerns within particular local communities that may need that additional support, and for us to do small group work within schools and within youth clubs. Evolve and the Youth Justice Service attend problem-solving community groups, and our early help hubs within, we've got 5 early help hubs across the authority. And they also hold locality meetings, and in both of those forums we're bringing together individuals, professionals who have I guess invested interests in those localities, and where they're able to talk about particular issues, antisocial behaviour being one of those concerns. So it enables us to identify worries at the earliest opportunity and then provide resources where they need to be. So CMET is, sorry, just I've forgotten something there, and it's CMET, sorry Cal, but CMET is another forum where we pull together professionals. So within that work, we generally pull together a number of around 23 professionals for any given meeting, where we can talk about some of the concerns and again provide responses where we might need to be getting out into the communities and working with our communities. So again, it's just to highlight the ways in which we work in partnership to identify those concerns. I'm conscious that as part of the principles that we've addressed in the report, there's quite rightly a reflection on victims and how victims are able to report incidents and how we respond as a local authority. So I just want to touch, if I can, on some of our responses to that contained within the report. So Evolve and CMET, as I've already stated, undertake quite a lot of detached work within our communities. Now, what that means is that we have people on the ground, out and about, talking to young people and adults within those communities, where they may express some concerns, they may express some worries, they may raise some issues that might need to be reported. So that is a really good starting point for us to have open communication and dialogue and guide people to report reporting processes really, and where they should, who they should be speaking to. Some of the work that has been undertaken has led us to thinking about how we reach communities a little bit wider than that as well, because when we're talking about outreach, we're talking about individual people in particular areas. We can't necessarily reach all of our communities in one go. So a lot of developmental work has been undertaken, and just one of the key points from that is about the development of a QR code for communities where there's easy access to information. And that includes how to report any concerns. So obviously we will be able to answer further questions should anybody have that a little bit later. In terms of the Youth Justice Service, we have a designated victim liaison officer working within that team. So the work of the victim liaison officers generally, not exclusively, but generally, at a statutory level, so where we have young people come through following charge for offences and are going through the court process. And that is purely because we have identified victims at that stage, so we know who they are and we are able to communicate directly with them. So the role of that individual is to meet with victims, to understand their perspective, to ensure that their perspective is then shared with staff within the team who are working with the young person. It enables us to ensure that the victims' voices are represented at key points. So when young people go through the bureau process, so that's the pre-court process, or through court, then we are ensuring that the victims' views are shared. At a prevention level, It can be more difficult to do that direct work with named victims, only because we might not know who they are. However, that does not prevent us from considering the impact of behaviours on individuals or on wider communities, and the work that we undertake with the young people, the direct work that is undertaken, is designed to help them think about the impact of their behaviours. We focus within youth justice on restorative approaches, so that can come under a number of guises. So it could be direct reparation, where we know the victim and the victim may want something specifically to be done to repay for the harm caused. It could be indirect reparation, which might be that we would look at working within communities more broadly. Or we could look at restorative conferencing, and that brings the young person and the victim together for a direct conversation, looking at impact. And what we find is that that is probably the most powerful way of helping a young person understand the impact of their behaviour. I guess it's important for us to, I suppose giving an example might be helpful in terms of how we work around antisocial behaviour and bring in reparation to communities and victims in that way. So one of the examples would be following a significant sort of public disruption that happened in the Mayhill area, and following that, we had a number of young people that were involved, that came through to the Youth Justice Service at a statutory level, but also a preventative level. And within that, we were able to identify one particular victim who was very willing to work with the service, which was really beneficial and helpful because it enabled us to do some restorative conferencing with some young people. However, what we were also able to understand was the community unrest and the community impact, which was really significant. And we worked very closely, all teams worked very closely with schools within that local area, and we were able to assist some of our young people to do some reparation in the wider community. Our CMET team were also very heavily involved in that and working directly with the community, with young people and adults in that particular community to consider impact, what matters to those individuals, and developing an action plan to support that community to move on from that particular incident, which was, you know, in the moment very devastating. The other point that I just wanted to highlight really is that we have PCSOs connected to our early help hubs across the local authority. They are able to work directly with young people, work with families, and naturally work with communities. So where antisocial behaviour is identified at an early level, they are also very key supports for us to get out and have conversations with those particular young people. And we're very lucky in terms of youth justice to have 2 police officers specifically attached to that service as well. So just in terms of challenges, again, that have been highlighted in the report, I think what is important for us to appreciate really is antisocial behaviour as a concept is quite large, and the behaviours that can be considered antisocial behaviour are quite broad and quite ranging. And given that that's quite a broad term, it can be quite a challenge to understand the specific worries and the direct impacts. And I think sometimes we've just got to reflect on that when we're talking about antisocial behaviour, because the behaviours could be really, really broad and cross-ranging. And I guess the point around that is when it comes to capturing data, that can be quite difficult because we don't necessarily have data that reflects to antisocial behaviour as a whole, but we might have, thinking in terms of youth justice, we might have data that reflects to numbers of young people that are coming through for public order offences, for example, or for, you know, individual criminal damage potentially that might be considered to be antisocial behaviour, but it is very, very wide-reaching that makes it very difficult for us to pinpoint data specifically. And I think across our services, we would probably reflect that can be a challenge. One of the other challenges for us as a whole is resource, and you know, perhaps it's unsurprising that we're talking about that in this context. I guess limited resources means that we can't be, as a whole service, we can't be everywhere at the same time, and it does mean that we have to channel rather resources to particular areas when we are able to identify that there is a need, and that can be quite difficult in order for us to manage antisocial behaviour right across Swansea. We have noticed some younger children coming through where antisocial behaviour is highlighted as a concern. So services generally work with young people, children and young people aged 10 and over. We are seeing some younger children being highlighted as potentially, you know, either on the cusp of antisocial behaviour or potentially involved in that. So our early help hubs are looking at how we can best support and better support at an earlier level, and whether we need to be considering work within primary schools and what that could potentially look like then moving forward. And one of the other challenges that we've highlighted is around online reporting on incidents. So this can be quite difficult for us to sort of manage as a local authority. We obviously want to work with young people in a very safe space and in a very safe way and in a respectful way. Any young person going through a criminal justice process, you know, we can't report, obviously, that there are reporting restrictions quite correctly. The use of online media is quite a challenge in as much as young people might be identified, you know, through community discussions, etc. Our worry is the impact that has on those young people, and naturally the impact on the communities then towards young people and how they may perceive that. So those are just some of the concerns and challenges. But I guess just to sort of sum up, I hope what comes through in the report and in terms of the points that I've raised is that our focus on prevention and early intervention is key. Our partnership working is absolutely crucial, and we've worked really hard to develop that, and I feel that we're in a really positive place in terms of the way that we work collectively. And what is really important to all of us is that we understand the young people that we are talking about. So we talk about antisocial behaviour, but ultimately it's the young people for us. Do we understand them? Do we understand what matters to them? These are the questions that we are asking. And what support is it that they need, and how do we channel the support in the right ways? So we all, as services, aim to do that, work individually or within small groups where there is a need. But fundamentally, it is about understanding those young people and the underlying causes of what we then perceive to be antisocial behaviour. So I hope I've summed that up appropriately, but obviously we will all answer any questions that you may have. So thank you.
Just like the report, it was very comprehensive, and I can open it up for questions or anything else. Anybody else wants to raise, no problem with that whatsoever. I've read about the principles and things like that. I don't want to start the questions up. I have got a few for you, but I think it's only right that the members, they can ask the questions first. It's a long way you are down there.
We can't hear.
Chair, we need Julie's mic on.
I've pressed the button twice, sorry. Can you hear me now? Yeah, apologies. Another apology. A couple of points I wanted to make, and one is that as a service, Helen summed it up really well in terms of what we strive to achieve is focused on the young person, but very mindful of the focus for us is on behaviour and supporting positive behaviour, but also working with the wider family and where we can engage in the wider community. And we also strive very earnestly to work in partnership with others, whether that's across the council or with external agencies at a strategic and operational level. And we know there's much more work to do, but the other point I wanted to make is that people's behaviour has been challenged and has changed through COVID, and that includes young people, and they're struggling as much as perhaps older people are as well in terms of 18 plus. So it's, and I know that's manifesting itself in many ways, and that is the way that they are being seen and perceived to behave within their communities or in schools or in their home, and that's creating demands and pressures on lots and lots of services, including child and family services. So for me, one of the key things is about how we work together to best understand our communities and how we can best support our communities. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Yvonne Jardine.
Thanks, Chair. And thanks very much for the report. I found it quite interesting. But I've got a few questions. And one of them is, I accept, or a statement first is that I accept that COVID has its part to play. We all have struggled, especially youngsters. I think we often overlook the fact that youngsters suffered suffering still through COVID. But I feel sometimes, this won't go down very well, but I feel sometimes that it's sort of used as a blanket excuse. Because one of my questions are, what happens to where you have a group of youngsters who have, there's been an ongoing issue. There's been an ongoing issue before COVID, and it is still ongoing. The parents, I know that the PCSOs and the police have tried interacting with the parents and the youngsters, but it doesn't seem to get solved for any length of time. It's a short-term solving. And one of the things that came up was, what is it that the youngsters want? And one of the things that they say is they don't want to go to a youth club, but they want a space of their own. And these youngsters, this particular group that I know and have had dealings with, it's not that they intend to cause bad behavior. They're just a little bit rowdy, and they are where they are because there's a space. It's a car park that they're in, but they're able to use the Wi-Fi. And so they congregate there, they become a bit boisterous, and sometimes it does get out of hand. So should we be looking, Helen said in the report that, working in schools and that sort of thing, but really consulting the youngsters who are seen as causing an issue, rather than the youngsters, because this is how I see consultation. The ones that take part in the consultation are what you could say are the law-abiding and know what they want and can have half a dozen of their friends in their parents' house. But for lots of children, you can't have your friends in. So they do the next best thing. And so should we be consulting those children who we grown-ups see as an issue and asking them what they want? And maybe where they hang out, because I went to a meeting recently, sorry, I'll be finishing in a minute. I went to a meeting recently, and one of the complaints were the children, the bench has encouraged undesirables. Well, what I find is by the time they're 18, they suddenly become desirable. But the bench is on the edge of this woodland. So for me, they're not really doing anything. The perception is that they're going to cause a problem. So why not consult with them and see, can we make it a bit more user-friendly for them? Give them a bit, because one day, where I live, the bus stop used to be full of youngsters. And I was saying one day, what happened to all the kids? Oh, they're old enough now to go to a club or go to the pub or whatever. So, maybe rather than always just seeing them as a problem, should we be looking for a solution? I'm sorry, Helen, I'm not saying the report isn't doing that. What I'm saying is, let's talk to the children who see us causing the problem. Sorry, thanks.
Does somebody want to come in to answer those? I think there was more than one question. I think there's a few there, so I'll leave that with voice from now.
There is actually another report which was around a different piece of work, not relating to antisocial behaviour per se, where we have done just that. We have made significant changes to how we support young people in Swansea, and we did that through what we call a systems review of our youth service and other supporting services. And through that review, we did undertake consultation with a large number of young people from lots of different areas and in lots of different spaces and places. So in Swansea, I think it's fair to say that we are leading in Wales in our contextual safeguarding approach, which looks at spaces and places that young people spend time, and we go to them in those spaces and places to ask them what matters to them. And essentially they are saying exactly what you have just said, is that they want a space that they feel safe in, and what makes them feel safe is access to lighting and shelter, and a bit of Wi-Fi is also helpful because that engages them. The difficulty is that just by the very nature of large groups of young people makes communities feel uncomfortable. And sometimes, most of the time, the majority of these young people are not causing any problem. It's just by virtue that there are so many of them that people become uncomfortable about them being around there. So our CMET panel, which meets every fortnight, has spent a lot of time talking about large gatherings of young people and what we can do to try and promote positive behaviours amongst those young people. The reality is that our CMET approach is targeted to extra-familial harm, so risk that the young people may be experiencing or at risk of experiencing. For a lot of those discussions, those young people were not experiencing harm. They were just hanging out with their mates, but causing aggravation for the wider community. So really speaking, it didn't fit the remit for the CMET panel, and that is why we have this wider partnership approach. We've changed our youth model from youth clubs to a blended model of youth clubs, outreach work, detached work and work in schools, just to try and talk to young people about the impact that some of their behaviours can have on their wider community. So we've done a lot of work around how they can keep themselves safe and where they can go for support for themselves. And I think the next step is about developing their understanding about how some of the things that they do, which is harmless fun to them, and isn't causing them to be at risk of harm, can be causing upset for wider communities. And that is a big piece of work that is cross-cutting, across a lot of services, including education, but it is one that we have definitely made a start on.
Can I just come in there as well, please? Thank you. I want to pick up on something that Yvonne raised in relation to language, with young people being described as undesirable. It's quite an emotive term to call a child or young person undesirable, and this is something that has been picked up across the board when we use language that can blame young people or display them as undesirable. What we're doing is kind of setting a precedent, and if that is put out in the public domain, it doesn't matter what those young people are doing in those public spaces, they are always going to be seen as undesirable. We've last year had our independent inquiry into child sexual abuse that was published, and it picked up on language that is used not just by professionals but in the media, and when we use language that victimises young people, we miss harm that is experienced by young people. And that is something that we are really passionate about in Swansea Children's Services across the board. And our CMET Youth panel, so we've got a panel of young people that sit together that talk about issues that affect communities and affect them in the communities. They're currently working on a language guide, and some of the things that they have picked up on is when in public groups, maybe social media groups online, when they're described as yobs or as troublemakers, how much of an impact that can have on them. It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you're going to label young people as trouble, you're more likely to see them as trouble. And we are really passionate about making young people part of their communities and having a voice within their communities. If you include them in the things that you want to do, if you include them in things like inquiries and developing the communities, then you're more likely to get a positive response when you're out in the community speaking to them, engaging with them, and communities will see them a lot different as well. So that's some of the work that we are trying to undertake as teams as well.
Two things which I have picked up when you talked about the mediation. I have been involved a little bit in that when we try to fetch two lots of families or whatever together. And what we found was, if it's positive and the two will come together, you get a positive outcome. But sometimes, perhaps one of them don't want to come to the mediation, they just don't know. That's when I think a difficulty can arise. I don't know, we have mediation officers in the council, I believe. Yes? Yeah, I thought so. And the other one, when you talk about the PCS, what was going round, I was in the Cotch in Cheddar Crescent last week. We have surgeries there, and we also support them financially from our community budget, our council's community budget. And I was surprised, there was two young, I call them young, two young PCSOs in there. And I said to them, what are you doing? What are you up to? Is anything wrong? But the presence was there, because it was half term, and of course there was all sorts of stuff going on. So I thought that was rather positive. And the little one, some was 3, 4, 5 years of age, talking to the PCSs, which I thought was good. And then from that, I was very interested in when it comes to I think it first started, they called it problem tenants. And I think I responded by saying about tenants with problems. But can you see the new contract that council tenants will have? They'll have a contract now instead of a secure tenancy. Any views on that? Because if it's a lot of antisocial behaviour, sometimes you can come to notice of intent to seek with or letter saying we could evict. I know it's the last policy, but I was just wondering if anybody picked up on it.
We have the manager of the antisocial behaviour team in housing sits on our CMET panel, and where we have worked with some quite difficult to engage groups of young people, we have utilised the skills and expertise from that antisocial behaviour team in housing to go out and speak to the parents and have those types of conversations. So CMET is a solution-focused panel, and we're looking at solving problems by working together. But sometimes having that that support from housing to point out to the parents, who ultimately are responsible for their children, that this could impact on their tenancy, has been positive in a few cases. However, sometimes, despite their very best efforts, these parents are not able, to make a difference, which is when professional support would be required. So we would be keen that communication is both ways, and that actually, if we felt, when our assessment was that the parent was doing their very, very best, that would be taken on board, in terms of housing taking those actions going forward.
Do you mind? Could I just pick up on you talked about the... I could keep checking. That's fine. No, not a problem. I just wanted to pick up on your points about the restorative conference and the mediation work, and you're absolutely right. To bring two individuals together or two parties together, depending on the circumstances, where that isn't going to be a productive session, is not something that we would advocate, because naturally we would want that to be a positive experience for all, so that there is a resolution and the individuals are able to move on positively from that. But just to say, where we have situations such as that, where we feel actually it would be more detrimental to bring them together into the same room, we do undertake what is considered shuttle mediation, which is where we would facilitate communication between two parties through our victim liaison officer would take the lead in that role, in order to ensure that there is communication, but that it is done in a safe way, hopefully with the same outcome, which is a positive resolution. So just wanted to clarify, because your point is absolutely correct, but we obviously assess all of that and manage all of that as best we can.
I would say, they should attend, because it's in everybody's interest to get round the table if they're trying to sort that problem. You are right about sometimes the parents are doing their best. What gets me is when they say, I can't do nothing with them. And of course, the discipline perhaps I was having as a young person is completely different now to what it is today. So I can understand, exactly where you're coming from. I would like to have something on Evolve. I was with, I bumped into two young people working in the blind and mice in the Portmead Avenue Centre. And, I am nosy, and I said, exactly what do you do? Because it was in the street. And they were telling me they work for Evolve. Oh, I said, is that social services? They said, no, it's Evolve, But it's, but it's nice to see those kind of people in the community. And we also encourage cabinet members to come into our community, something that never used to happen many years ago. But you see more cabinet members come in. If I got an issue, the cabinet members will come along, and I think that's a good thing. And I hope all the cabinet members can be with the same support as well. That's where I'm coming from.
I don't often press the red button. Yeah, I think just to take on your point, that is probably part of our blended approach. So where the teams would traditionally sort of just work within the club or within the youth club, if you like, what we're trying to do is offer that blended approach to young people that have said they wouldn't want to go to club or they don't want to go to club. So what we try and do is obviously engage with the community, try to engage with young people where they feel more safe. So that's why you probably would see more youth workers out and about within the community. So they're either doing the outreach work or they're doing the detached piece of work, which is more a targeted piece of work. And that's something that we're trying to get across the whole of Swansea in the areas that we work in. So that is the outreach model.
And no doubt when you're out and about, your eyes and yours are there for the council, just like, what's it, the NSU, was it, Neighbour Support Unit? Or, I remember the other name. Any other questions? Yes, thank you.
Chair, I did put my hand taken off.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Helen, for a very well delivered presentation. It leaves us short, really, of real questions. I just wanted to explore what sort of input you would have into schools in terms of the curriculum, because lots of schools, particularly the secondary sector, would have a PSC, a personal social education. I wonder, do you have any input into that? Because you can give some real cases and examples that could be utilised within that sector.
I'm going to pass the buck, though, because there are people here who can give you much better insight than I can. So I don't know whether you guys, Tom, Paul.
Yeah, I'm happy. So I think it's pre-locked, and now we started to look into going into schools to deliver sessions to young people. We piloted a couple of schools in the local area and went very well. Started discussions with Kelly and the CMET team then, and we looked to put like a multi-agency approach to going into schools. Number of agencies were involved. We ran a carousel event in one of the local comprehensives last year over a 2-day period where we targeted year 9 pupils, and they'd move from sort of session to session. So every pupil in that year group got delivered a targeted session from different organisations, and we've got a meeting I think next week to deliver our next, and the plan is to roll this programme out across all our local comprehensives.
Yeah, so that's is it on? No.
No.
Oh, there we go. That programme focused on extra familiar harm, and extra familiar harm it does sometimes include those worries around antisocial behaviour. So some of those sessions would include Tom talking about what antisocial behaviour is and what positive behaviour looks like in your communities. But then we also bring in our partner agencies such as Media Academy Cymru, who deliver information on keeping yourself safe from knife crime. We have our team, our CMET team, that will deliver information on sexual health. We will talk about sexual exploitation, online exploitation, and give those young people a good overview on keeping themselves safe when they're outside of their family home. Our hope is for this to be delivered across Swansea in every secondary school. As a team, we have also received referrals from schools for specific peer groups or year groups, and also we've worked with some primary schools as well. So we work on a referral basis, but we're happy to deliver that within schools. Our motto is taking that work to the young people where they spend time. That might be schools, but we also deliver support within communities. If we go out and meet a group of young people where there are worries in a community space, we will find a suitable venue, or we will take a detached vehicle out to that community space and deliver those sessions, that information, that advice in the space that they spend time, because that's what young people told us was important, was making sure that they had a safe space for us to be able to work with them, and it was being delivered by people that they trust as well. So
also, in addition to that, so what Tom and Kelly have talked about is quite targeted work with a specific age range in school. So as a general model, the early help hubs have workers that frequently spend time in schools, both secondary and primary schools. So we have emotional health and wellbeing workers who are aligned to every secondary school in Swansea, and they spend the majority of their time in those schools, and they run workshops within school for groups of young people. They also do one-to-one sessions with individuals, and they can do some wider work with the family. But generally, if it is a whole family approach that's required, that would go to one of the lead workers in early help through that conduit from the emotional health and wellbeing worker. We've also got our youth hub development officers who have the primary schools in the comprehensive schools in their clusters, and they go in and they spend time during breaks and lunch times talking and engaging with young people in general, and then identifying, individuals who may require support and meeting with them on their own. They also signpost young people into other services. They encourage them to attend our club nights. They tell them where we might be on outreach or detached, so that they have got something to do in the evenings. And then lastly, we've got senior lead workers who work primarily with the professionals in the school to talk to them about any children or young people or families that they are worried about. And then their role then is to get the family into the school, and they will have a what matters conversation where they will talk to the family, the child or young person, and the professional, and try between them to identify what it is the family are struggling with, what they would like their life to look like, and who can support them to achieve that. So sometimes that means a referral will come in to early help, or it might go to CMET or to YOS or to Evolve, or sometimes they may develop a plan that the family themselves can work on, with or without the assistance of others. So it might just be giving them advice and information that they can continue then to embed themselves in their own lives, or it may be that they'll end up working with one of our services. So in terms of working in partnership with education and support for young people in schools, there is a lot on offer, but the issue again for us is capacity, because whilst we have got these workers aligned, there are a lot of schools in Swansea and there are a lot of children in those schools, but the support and the offer is there, and also that mechanism for signposting and redirecting into other services is there as well.
Can I just follow on just something, schools being graded upon their their academic results? I'm just wondering how much sort of emphasis are they actually putting on kinds of subjects like personal and social education, which from my experience in teaching of many years ago was way down in the priority list because mathematics and English was very, very, very high. You know, I'm just wondering where in the curriculum do you feel sort of PSE, personal social education, and this kind of education features, you know, in schools?
I think it's dependent on the school and the area. I don't think that from a local authority perspective we provide that as a direction, and it's left down to the schools to be able to make those decisions on the importance of them and the hierarchy of those social skills and becoming, you know, a good citizen. We know that there are some pockets around Swansea that do that really, really well, and there may be some that are struggling to understand where that fits within their curriculum. But there is definitely some really, really good pockets of work that we see across Swansea.
Could I pitch in Councillor Alison Pugh next, please?
Alison? Yeah, thanks, Chair. What, can you hear myself echoing? I just wanted to say that, you know, we've talked a lot this morning about reputation and the sort of perception of young people, you know, and that does bother me. And I know we've all been in meetings in regards to ASB lately. It's a bit of a hot potato at the moment topic, and you know, we know we've got excellent officer working, excellent partnership working. I do wonder that maybe we're not getting that message across enough. I don't know, but there's still a perception, I think, from the public. If I take Stadwin that sits in my ward, I do a lot of work with Stadwin and supporting, but the neighbours, the area, see it as where sort of more difficult children go, where the bad behaviour is still, even though Stadwin have done so much work to break down that reputation, you know, we still have a position of where Stadwin had the Swans, and the Swans, they wanted to take the young people over behind onto the park where there's a Mooga to play, and they were going to bring their own lights, and the park said, we don't want those sort of children here. You know, this is just, I couldn't believe my ears. I had to go and hear it for myself because I couldn't believe people were saying such a thing. Do you know what I mean? But you know, it's really hard out there. And when officers are advising, and it could be, you know, I'm a massive supporter in working with young people and having the shelters and working with education and the youth workers and everybody to build them. I've been trying for 4 years to get one in the ward. But we then have another area across the city where no matter what the officers say, the councillors and people there have decided they don't want that, and they can take it. They take it down. So you know, we are. I'm sorry for rambling, but you can see by all these meetings that we've had and all the good work that's going on there, but it's very difficult to change people's views out there and perceptions, you know, and I think that maybe we got to do more work internally and with comms, you know, to try and just change the narrative out there, because it is really difficult. And we all hung around whenever we could when we were young. You know, and like Yvonne said earlier, for most children, it is just a case that they're there hanging around with their friends, you know, but it's not seen like that. So anyway, sorry, that's my 2 pence.
We've just come in there. Myself and Paul are currently working on a bit of a project, and we're also working with Paul Evans from the community safety team as well on exactly that. We're going to be making it a bit of a project called Change the Narrative, and hoping to have an influence on how the public view our young people. They are your next generation of Swansea adults. We need to be respecting them and their spaces that they spend time. You know, if they want to play a game of football, let's give them the space to play a game of football. We face that. That is the biggest challenge we face as a youth service, as a service that work with exploited children. The views that the public have of these young people. We all met in big groups. They're growing up in a very different world to what we are. It's it's difficult, it's challenging. They've had 2 years of where they were meant to be socialising on a secondary level, which they weren't able to. They're now catching up on how they socialise in groups, and that's what we are trying to promote. We're looking at developing a workshop which looks at changing the narrative, talking about victim blaming language, talking about how young people perceive their position in the community. And Paul Evans as well from Community Safety Team is going to be providing us with support to develop a video which we can put out publicly, and we're going to make it a bit of a social media campaign as well. So it's one of our priority areas. I don't know whether you want to add to it, Paul.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that we as youth workers are trying to achieve with our kind of detached and outreach models, and you know, just to kind of advocate for young people, and you know, to utilise our 5 youth committees that we have across the city to be allowed to kind of express themselves, to be able to, you know, to go and speak to people and let them know how they feel within the communities that they live. So there's a lot of work going on, and hopefully what we would be able to do is to maybe get young people to actually deliver the sessions to others as well. So keep on kind of listening to what young people are saying, and keep on utilising young people to do, you know, to do that kind of work and get them out there and get them seen. So yeah, hopefully that's something that we will definitely achieve from this piece of work.
Jane Whitmore.
Thanks,
Could you come in now, Jane?
Thanks. Sorry, I left you in. Sorry, I'm not there today. Just to follow on really in terms of what we were talking about around parks and spaces and lighting, and actually perhaps Hayley's going to come in and say this as well. There is a working group. I know colleagues in the room, Kelly and Paul, where we've talked about what does that look like. So there's a significant investment in parks across all of Swansea, but that's been mainly for younger children, which is excellent and exactly the right thing to do. But what about our older children, and actually listening to their voices and picking up what Yvonne was saying at the beginning, and what Alison has said, and our officers about what else is there for safe spaces for older children and young people, and what we can do in terms of those kind of capital developments, and then work with the communities so that they can understand why that's important for them, because they are part of the community as well. So that is an ongoing piece of work as well, that we're, you know, to bring everything together that way. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Hayley-Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Jane was exactly right. I was going to just come in and reassure the committee that there is a working group and we are listening. You know, I work with youth services and the police efficiency team, and all the conversations that they are having with young people is identifying that they just want a space where there is lighting and shelter and somewhere where they can, you know, hang around. And again, I know that the committee have talked about this, and the officers as well, that there is a perception out there, and we do need to do a lot of work on that with our communities, because, you know, kids that are hanging around are not necessarily causing trouble or you know, exhibiting antisocial behaviour. It is just that they are hanging around. So yeah, just to reassure you that there is work behind the scenes going on.
Some of the things,
sorry,
can I just say, some of the things I picked up on, which you've touched on, is the youth club in Portmead Avenue, the Tuesday nights on the Mugger on Broughton Avenue, where the football team, I think some Swans comes along, local people, the police are there. I shake my head now and again, but you know, you talk about 30, 40, maybe 50 kids there on that night. I'm like that at the moment, thinking, when will that close, when will that end? And that what we'll have then is, oh, we've had this before, it turns the pump on and then turns it back off. I think you understand those sort of terms. And the other thing that's always upset me is the fact that there's a huge amount of good work in communities throughout Swansea with young people, whether it's sports, dance, music, and nobody ever seems to want to talk about the good I remember when agencies, all they was interested in the bad things in this estate, that estate, because they were chasing money, obviously. But I have seen some positive things in the last 2 years, especially up on the Mugger and the young people there. But also, you talk the young people, but it's not always the young people that's causing trouble. You know, that's the sad thing. Yes.
Just to add, I was in a meeting yesterday about, obviously the piece of work on Broughton Avenue, and that is a phenomenal example of multi-agency working, where CMET, Evolve, the police, housing, everybody's involved in that piece of work, and just for you to know, Kicks have said that could continue for as long as it needs to continue. So that came from yesterday, but again, it's that multi-agency work that was created from an issue that was, and the work now that's going to be undertaken from that is about maybe looking at a youth shelter, extending the Mugger area to make it more accessible and inclusive to all ages. So again, I just kind of want to reiterate the fact that the multi-agency work is critical for this, and that is a good example of that. So yeah.
And for information, I believe they put in a new surface in the Mugger that is coming from the council's community budget. Yeah.
Marvellous.
I will sort of just reiterate, well, I won't reiterate, but I totally agree with everything that's been said about respect for young people. And I'll use perhaps my own example. I was a very challenging young girl, but the head and the deputy of the school I went to never once gave up on me. They treated me with respect and kindness, and they instilled in me that ethos that I've carried through since I was there, having gone to 3 secondary schools, not because I was naughty or anything, but because circumstances were with family moves. So children do get very disengaged, and it's very easy for a disengaged young person to be tarred with a brush of you're bad. So, and this is what I think people need to, people and schools, even schools today, need to understand the circumstances of why some of those children are behaving as they are. And I know that we've got some good schools who will really work with Evolve and yourselves, but there is still sometimes, I think, that stigma that goes with that child, that schools need to understand what they are doing to those children, and they are children. So, that is, I just think, a fundamental respect for young people is something that needs to go forward. Anyway, I did have a question. I just wanted to share a little bit of my background as well. Even though, people will say that butter, I look as if butter would never melt in my mouth. And I do generally surprise people with them. Yeah. But, but I do say to people, right, well, what did you do when you were 14 and 15? Well, we used to hang around by the bench. Right, so why can't our young people hang around by a bench? It's like, right, it's not, things haven't changed actually, apart from the external influences that are on young people, which were still around. I'm nearly 70 and they were still around when I was 14 and 15. I mean, I can tell you, it might not have been certain drugs, but it was certainly other drugs that you could get very easily. I went to quite a nice school, so, it's not, it's still there. But the challenges that you have in paragraph 2.3, it is very worrying when you've put that younger children are now being identified. I just wondered if that's because they are the siblings of older children who may be coming towards youth justice, be involved with the youth justice system, or that there is an issue, whether it is you've actually put in there that it could be within the community, but that that really there is this thought that you should be working in primary schools with younger children if funding was there. Now, to my mind, I would have thought that, and Julie, you did refer to it, that there's always this knock-on effect, isn't there? So that children who might be in small need at 7 become a much greater need at 9, but there isn't the support actually there to be able to help them. So we've got this sort of, we've got this self-prophesying circle, haven't we? Which then puts impact on social services, youth justice, and other aspects. So how can we overcome this then? So what money would you need to be able to put this provision in place?
We have done some work in primary schools. We've had referrals into CMET, you know, for groups of young people. I think one example was a group of primary school children who we were worried about online. So the CMET team went in and they did a targeted piece of work with those young people. So we do work with, you know, primary school children when they come to our attention as groups, and obviously as individuals when they're referred to early help and to the single point of contact. I think that capacity and resources is always going to be an issue. And one of the things that features really heavily in the CMET plans, because what the CMET team do, they undertake assessments of peer groups and areas. So whereas, you know, if you're a social worker or an early help lead worker, you're assessing an individual child or their family. So CMET do it differently. They assess peer groups of young people or spaces and places, areas that they spend time. So particularly when we're doing the area assessments, as part of the planning, we always consider the community guardianship, what is in the community and what will always be in the community. Because, you know, we would love to have enough workers, to have youth workers, you know, and CMET workers in every community in Swansea. The reality is, you know, we haven't got that. But what we are trying to do is raise awareness, change the narrative and create that community guardianship. So where we tried to do that and were successful to a degree was up in Mayhill following the disturbance. You know, we went to the community events. They told us that they would like a youth club in their area. So we agreed with a cohort of community members that we would set up this youth club and that we would then support those community members to continue to run the youth club. Well, there was a lot of buy-in in the beginning and people did come to the youth club, but when it came time to then hand in that youth club over, we never managed to get there. So we are still running that youth club ourselves in Mayhill because we weren't able to hand it back to the community who had asked for it. And I suppose that this change in the narrative and raising awareness, that's where we want to get to. We don't want professional services to be responsible for communities. We want communities to be responsible for communities, but we want to come in and we want to work with the people in those communities, you know, to raise awareness, to upskill them, to give them the tools and the resources that they need to set them up so that we can move on and that they can continue to carry on with that. But I think one of the big issues with that is, you know, what we've all talked about here today is, you know, the reputation and the, you know, the narrative that is there about young people being problematic and not being seen as, you know, an integral part of their community and important. And when we start changing that, then hopefully we will start to, you know, instill that community spirit back and enable these communities to meet their own needs without having to have support come in all the time. And there are some places where that works really well, and hopefully we can build on that going forward.
Can I add as well to the question that you had in relation to there being young people that we're identifying? That's not just in relation to antisocial behaviour. That's in relation to other extrafamiliar harm like exploitation and trafficking. The age range has decreased, so we are seeing younger people that are at risk of significant harm outside the family home. Now, we can do all we can on a ground level, on an operation level to address that, but there also needs to be a top-down approach. You know, we've got legislation that is going through government at the moment about a safer internet policy that needs to come through, because our young people are being exposed to so much content that is inappropriate for their age. And when we talk about working with context, that online world is often very difficult context, our most difficult context to work with, and that is where exploitation can often start. That is where often crime can often start. That is where our young people are being targeted by adults and exploited. So it is a mixed approach. The disruption of that is extremely difficult, and that's why we're seeing a younger cohort of young people coming through.
So do you think that families don't understand either the dangers of the internet? They don't know what to do to be able to make it safer. And in some cases, because they might have perhaps a bit of a blasé attitude towards what the kids are watching, that, you know, that is a danger that families don't understand. And in the case of some families, well, it would never happen to my child. So, you know,
rather than it being a blasé, I think the internet changes so quickly. Apps are developed quicker than we can understand them, and as much as we can catch up with, you know, providing that information and support, we've developed as a team a QR code and a link tree which advises parents of how to set privacy settings on different apps, how to look for messages, etc. However, they change rapidly, and obviously the way that these systems work, some of these are not managed by UK companies. So if there is an issue, we have to get advice from people across seas. It's a very, very difficult world to be working in, and obviously we need our government to support us in being able to tackle that and disrupt any exploitation or inappropriate content that is online that affects young people.
It's really quite shocking, Chair, isn't it? You know, and that was something I didn't realise, that just how difficult it now is.
Yeah. Sometimes the parents have got to take some sort of responsibility. We know that. It's when they go out and they leave their front door and they go out, whether they sit at town or around the corner, whatever they're going to do, it is you know, being a parent can be very difficult. Dealing with those, you know, I'm no spring chicken, I'll put my hands up to that. But, you know, I've seen it on many occasions, and I've seen parents trying to get the kids into school and all them sort of things. And then I've seen the other side of the coin, with the young people are looking after the parents, especially ones I've seen. It's a love that I don't think, you know, it's hard to witness when you see a young child, 12, 13, actually helping the mother who has got marks on her hands because of her addictions and whatever. And those are the sort of people, they're young people, and they do tremendous amount of work. Nobody knows what they're doing in the house. And, you know, to me, you know, I'll never forget seeing that sort of thing. Swabbing you up, and that's before they go to school. And if you go the night before, you've got the youngsters ironing the younger children's clothes, those sort of things. It's unbelievable. That, anyway, I won't rabble on too much, but I wanted to touch on schools staying open after they closed, if you like. I think that was a big step forward. And you.
I think there's a certain type of child that will stay in an after-school club, and they are probably not the children that we are talking about today. So, and that's why it's, you know, it's so important, as Yvonne said earlier, to consult with the children and young people about what they want, because, you know, good on the schools that they're offering that for the type of child or young person that will engage in it. But I think if we asked, you know, a wider group of children and young people what they would like to do after school, it probably wouldn't be stay in school and do something, and then we could plan around that.
You know, I think that's what I'd say. What I'm saying, the school stays open after hours, and the activities that goes on, when you see parents going in, actually learning to read with the children.
Oh, I see, sorry.
You know, that's the side I'm coming from, and I see the sports, and if you're ever feeling down in about 6 weeks' time, go up to Clyde School, go round the back and see 40, 50 young people being trained the football with the coaches. They've even got different officers within just about the football. Oh. And I think it's great. So I didn't mean it on that.
No.
It was coming from. And the teacher.
Chair, we can't hear anything online at the moment. Apologies.
Sorry. Yeah,
Yes, it was. Thanks, Chair. It was in terms of changing the narrative. Thought that popped into my head was, and it linked to your comments about the evolved workers, and you come across them. You're going to thank me for this. Is a couple of points. One is that any elected member is welcome to pop into the early help hubs, and particularly on youth club nights if they wanted to contact Paul. I think that would be really interesting and helpful. And the other thought I had, Chair, was elected members can support changing the narrative. I think they have a really crucial role to help not just the service and officers, but in their communities. So I think there's something that we could offer to support that, if that's you're so minded to include that as part of your recommendations to help with that change in that narrative. Just a thought. And just for Alison, I think we should start hanging around for older people so we can then show that it's okay to hang around, whatever your age.
I'll be joining you there. Yeah, indeed.
Give me half a chance and I can send this.
I feel the cold too much these days to hang around.
No, there is an invite for any anybody that would like to do an outreach session when it's -5, or do a detached session or a school-based session. I think it's a wonderful idea. Yeah, please contact me. I'll make my details known. Thank you, Julie.
We've talked about the younger element in terms of antisocial behaviour. I mean, Swansea being a university city, we've got somewhat in excess of 20,000 students in and around the town. I don't know what your involvement there with the university. I mean, there are a couple of liaison officers that I'm aware of. I don't know if you know, is it Steph Stanton and Ellie Masterton? They're two young people. Anyway, their role is really to try and keep order within the Uplands and the Bryn Mawr ward, because it has a high density of students. I think there's about 1,700 students in that area alone. I mean, there are elements of antisocial behaviour, being it, I suppose, smoking cannabis and a bit of alcohol abuse, which leads to sort of late night parties and so forth. I was just wondering what sort of input or do you have with the university in terms to perhaps educate them in terms of antisocial behaviour?
I don't think we're linking in regards to specifically antisocial behaviour, but we have linked in more recently. Our CMET team have linked in with a volunteer service at the university and brought them into some of our detached work. So we're building links there, and we are aware that there is going to be a developing safeguarding team within the university, and I'm sure that our links are going to develop a lot more strongly with that service developing. Julie's.
A lot, I mean, in real terms, a lot of the students, I mean, they're great, you know, we got to get on well with them, and it's only those few that create that sort of issue. But it does bring us back to that point of the perspective that the residents have. I mean, the number of emails that I get, you know, denigrating these students, and just as an example, was it last Saturday we had the George Cross versus the Dragons fighting in one of the streets. Well, it looked as though it was fighting. When you looked at the video element, I mean, basically they were playing as little kids, you know, throwing eggs at each other. But you would swear that it was World War II, as far as, or III, I should say, in terms of the residents' view of that, you know. It's sad that that is the case.
If I could just come back on that. We know the new head of safeguard.
Just let you know, I got two other speakers coming after you, and that will be Paul Thomas and Alison Pugh.
Just in response to that point, we know the new head of safeguarding at the university. So is actually a senior officer that's leaving from my service to go there. So I will put this on her agenda for her to pick up, because I think it's a really valid point in all seriousness, because we generally work up to the age of 18, but we do work beyond that, and certainly in Kelly's world and in the Children with Disabilities team, that's true. But I think that's really important for us to pick that up as a point in relation to their part of the community, and there could be potential safeguarding concerns as well. So I'll mention that to the person that's going to be the new head of safeguarding at the university.
Thank you.
Paul Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. I'll probably devolve this to Gareth with regard to the ASB, but just to reassure the committee that from a community safety point of view, we work very closely with the universities and the colleges. We attend drop-in sessions in the main accommodation blocks for students to be able to raise concerns and issues. And I imagine, Chair, that Gareth will be able to provide a little bit more detail as to the work that goes on with regard to antisocial behaviour associated with students and particular hotspot areas.
Alison.
Yeah, I'm glad Paul came in then, because I was going to say the same thing, and I'm sure Gareth can expand on that. But just to reassure as well that from the shenanigans on Saturday, you know, I know the leader had been in touch with the university, and you know, all that is in hand. Being spoken to, you know, it looked worse than what it actually was. Do you know what I mean? But yes, we do, Councillor, we do get a lot of complaints in, but Gareth will, and Paul Evans work very closely with everybody. So I leave Gareth to come in, Chair.
Gareth.
Yeah, just very quickly, just to make everybody aware that the Police Community Safety Department, which I work within as well with the ASB team, they have a university, specific university officers that work directly within both universities, and there's a university liaison officer that we link in directly. So whenever there's any ASBs committed by students, whether it be in the city centre, you know, during student nights, or whether it's in the uplands or any other area within the city, we link in directly with their disciplinary procedures. In the past, we've done joint letters and things like that to see how we can best deal with them with regards to managing their behaviour to a point where it can affect their courses and how they deal with it. And on the back of that, then, as a community safety team, we work directly with the universities regarding that expectation that we have from new students when they first come into the city. So doing freshers, we have a direct involvement with them and other agencies within the local authority with regards to everything from antisocial behaviour right the way through to refuse collection and what they do when they leave university as well, to try and reduce the issues that we've identified in the past with regards to how students work within their communities. And there has been a little bit of work in the past, successful work in the past, where local communities have had included students on litter picks and things like that to try and make them part of the community. I know we did that a couple of years ago, before, well, pre-COVID that was. But so there is ongoing work that we do with community safety, plus how we link in our ASB departments with their disciplinary procedures as well.
Yeah, we've got a litter pick next week, I think.
Yeah, still ongoing as well, yeah.
Does they have Rag Week now in that university? Remember Rag Week? They used to have a whole week of... They don't do it now, do they? No. Okay. The only other thing I was going to mention, I lost my page here somewhere. It's gone. I'll leave that now. When you talk about community guardians, we set up community guardians in Blind Mice Put Me 10 years ago, but they were confidential. So if you had a new park or new work or amenities put in the community, people near there would actually, you know, like watchmen, if you like, or watchwomen, and they wouldn't have to report it. They would come to us as a local group, and we would take it forward then if it was damaged, if you had the police or the council, because you do get a lot of people out there who, they mean well, but they don't like to put themselves on offer. And I know quite a few councillors will say to them, give it to us and we'll take it forward. And I think that's a positive move you know, but the community, it worked very well for the community guardians we had. Sadly, like everything else, we're in a football team, cricket, boxing, when they get older, they pass on. They're very, very hard to replace. And you can't get those sort of people, you know, coming forward like we used to have. That's a sad thing. And last but not least, we mentioned the Mayo Community Centre. Where in Mayo is I'm a Mayo boy, community centre. I know it's all ones up on the hill, the boxing club and the community centre up there. But where's the one in Mayo?
Next to the new surgery.
Yeah.
Sorry?
It's next to the new surgery.
Oh, right. Because we used to go to the Swansea Boys Club, you know what I mean?
It's an old community centre. It's been there for a long, long time, innit? I just didn't know what road it was on, but yeah, it's been there a while.
It's positive and it's nice to know. And do you ever have any trouble gaining access to any of the community centres in Swansea?
Yes.
Definitely.
Yeah, I know. You don't have to mention them, but I'm aware, you know, people are trying to do things in the community, like with the mugger. Trying to get it to the community centre is not always easy. We're trying to break that down as well as local councillors. But it's sad when maybe it's the policy of the council to transfer assets and these sort of things, and they give them a lease. Those people take responsibility, which is good. But sometimes it gets very tight. I can't even get my granddaughter's birthday party in there or something. So you understand where I'm coming from. So you are aware. Do you report that then straight to the...
Yes, we do. So we have had community centres let us in. Some community centres just wouldn't let us in. Some community centres have let us in, but then, you know, the slightest bit of aggravation and we're out again. So there was one community centre that shut us down because the children had pizza and they got pizza sauce on the wall. So, you know, we were happy to clean up the pizza sauce on the wall. It wasn't an issue, but they felt that was too much. There was another one that wouldn't let us back in because somebody set off the fire alarm. You know, it's not something that we want them to do, but it's not the end of the world. And there is another community centre that won't even let our staff in the car park, which is empty all day long. But because it's their car park and it's not our car park, our staff are now parking on the residential streets all around our centre, and their car park is completely empty.
And with it being busy in that area, they could be charging £1 or £2 a day to school teachers just to park it, and it's secure all day. It's sad when, you know, when these things come about, you know, it's... Yes, Cheryl.
I'd like to put on record, if Scrutiny Community Centre is one of them, can you please let me know, because there is a new management committee in there now, and I know that there were issues previously, but I know that the new management committee would like to try and overcome those issues. So could you let, I'm not on the community centre myself. Okay, that's fine.
Could make a recommendation that you have a young person from the community that sits on the community panels for community centres.
And can I say, maybe
in skating, we'd probably get more chance with the young people than what we would, because we're looking for, and especially if they can do a treasurer's job, that'd be great.
And I think it's worth remembering, just last week, I like majorette dance, I like all sorts of music, but I am not 100%, but I was told that the band who was practicing in one of the community centres had a noise abatement notice put on them. You know, it is sad.
Depends on how high the volume was.
But I funded them out of my community grant, so maybe I can have a little more of it. But you know, you get these. Don't forget the volunteers. Not just who makes the uniforms, the travel, all the competitions all around the country and that sort of thing. Noise abatement notice. I was trying to get one of them, and I'm still trying to get it after probably about 3 years, you know, so anyway. I used to be a front man, okay? Any more questions? Any more? No? Oh, Pritchard. Gareth, you come in, right? Yeah, that's it. Any more questions? Anything? Okay, well, I've gone to agenda item 6. But first of all, can I say before, thank you very much for your attendance, thank you very much for your input. we know how difficult the job is out there because we're trying to help her do it as well. I know, like you say, as a local councillor, if there's any time I can give any of you support, and I'm sure that goes for others, I'm not speaking for others, but if whoever needs support in the Pendary area, you come and see, you contact me and I'll give you whatever support I can. Okay. Item 6 is the project plan. As you can, if you look at that, we've had 3 of these meetings in about 9 days. We have. When I was feeling a bit tired. The next one is on the 9th of March. That's just over a week, you know.
Next week, yeah.
And it's Council Housing, Neighbourhood Support Unit. I should be interested. Public Protection Services, including noise abatement. There.
I just update as well.
Sorry?
I just update as well.
Yes. Come on, you.
We've also we're doing some work to get people in April and May relating to some of the consultation activities. So contacted people to get some equality groups in to talk to you, and maybe it may be a matter of actually going out to them as well, and also young people. We're looking to get the voices of children and young people involved, aren't we? And I think social services are actually working to do that. Jane McLaurin and Julie are looking at that as well. And also, I haven't got onto this yet, but it'd be trying to get the some business community involved as well. And when I think we had a call for evidence, which I sent around to everybody, which was a comment about that around the quadrant and things, so we can include that in that. Anyway, just a little update.
Okay. I always like getting out of this building and going out into local communities. I'm restricted to a certain amount, but whenever possible, by going out there, yes, as councillors or as council officers, we take out a bit of stick. But once you got that frustration out, the amount of information you could pick up, and some, perhaps 3 or 4 years ago, still contact me from other areas because we went out to their backyard, and they appreciate it. Just out there for a bit. But apart from that, yeah, good job. Anything on the project plan? No. Okay, well, thank you for attendance. It's sunny now by the look of it. You must have fetched the